The first thing that startled the enemy wasn't the weapons, or even the humans themselves. It was the silence. Armies had gathered on the fractured moon of Charon 9, legions of the Empire's best soldiers arrayed in perfect formation. Dozens of species stood shoulder to shoulder, their armor clinking like the machinery of inevitability. The Galactic Council had demanded Earth's submission, and when Earth refused, the Council sent armies. That morning, the armies expected noise, battle cries, negotiations, the thunder of war drums. Instead, they got one human stepping forward, saying nothing, hands clasped behind his back like a man out for a casual walk. The human's name was Elias Kale. No armor. No weapons. No army at his back. Just a man with sharp eyes and a faint smirk that spread across his face as if he knew something no one else did. The gathered soldiers laughed, though not all of them. A few, those who had studied humans more closely, shifted uneasily. They knew this wasn't the first time the galaxy had underestimated Earth. But none had seen it quite like this. One man, facing tens of thousands. The commander of the Imperial host, a towering reptilian general named Iraq, hissed in amusement. One man. This is what humanity sends to face judgment. His voice, amplified by translators, rolled across the battlefield. You mock us. You think your words will save you? Elias didn't answer. He just looked up, scanning the formations, his gaze lingering long enough that the soldiers shifted uneasily under the weight of it. Silence stretched out, unnatural in a place meant for the roar of war. The soldiers grew restless. Iraq, insulted by the stillness, lifted his plasma blade. You will be made example! But Elias finally spoke, his voice calm and steady, carrying farther than it should have across the cold, airless expanse. Do you all even know why you're here? The words cut. Not for their power, not yet, but for their absurdity. Soldiers glanced at one another, as though they hadn't expected philosophy on the eve of slaughter. Some laughed again, the kind of laughter born of unease. Elias continued, not raising his voice, not moving an inch. You were told humanity was dangerous. That we needed to be put down before we spread too far, before we disrupted the Council's balance. But let me ask you this, how many of you volunteered for this? And how many of you were ordered? That question landed differently. Across the ranks, there were flickers, hesitation, doubt. Elias saw it and pressed, his words threading into the cracks of their discipline. You think you're here to conquer Earth? No. You're here to prove to the Council that you can still be controlled. That you obey without question. That you're loyal pets, not free people. He let the pause hang, his gaze never wavering. Do you like being pets? The silence grew heavier. General Iraq snarled. Enough of this! Advance! But the soldiers didn't move. Not yet. A ripple of hesitation spread like a wave through the ranks. Elias stood calmly, the picture of patience. The absurdity of it all wasn't lost on him. He remembered the night before, back on the human flagship orbiting just out of detection range, when Admiral Rhodes had said, "We don't need weapons. We need one voice. One moment of hesitation, and their armies will collapse under their own weight." Elias had laughed then, thinking the Admiral was joking. Now, standing before tens of thousands of enemies, he realized Rhodes hadn't been joking at all. But he wasn't fearless. His palms sweated behind his back. He could feel his heart hammering like a war drum in his chest. Still, he kept his face composed, because that was the real weapon. Not plasma, not bullets. Composure. Iraq slammed his blade into the ground, sparks scattering across the fractured rock. You will not listen to him, he roared. This is an enemy of the Council. Kill him! And yet not one soldier moved. It was then that Elias realized something almost funny. He hadn't done anything extraordinary yet. He had just asked questions. Questions so simple they should have been harmless. But in the rigid order of the Council's armies, questions were more dangerous than weapons. Elias took a slow step forward. Here's the truth. Earth doesn't want to fight you. We don't hate you. We don't even know most of you. But the Council? He smiled, and it wasn't friendly. They've decided we're a threat because we don't bow. And you, every one of you standing here, you're proving them right. Because you've already forgotten what it means to stand for yourselves. The words slipped under armor, burrowed beneath centuries of conditioning. Soldiers shifted, claws and mandibles twitching, weapons lowering just a fraction. Elias let the silence build again, let the tension thicken until it was unbearable. Then he said the line that would later be whispered across the stars. Armies fall silent when truth is spoken. Even Iraq faltered. Only for an instant, but it was enough. His soldiers saw it. The ripple of doubt became a tremor. A tremor became stillness. Thousands of soldiers, trained to obey, bred to fight, stood frozen, not daring to move. Elias almost laughed at the absurdity. He, a man who had never held command in his life, had stopped armies with a sentence. And yet he knew this was only the beginning. Silence was powerful, but silence alone wouldn't save humanity. From the corner of his vision, he saw it, the faint shimmer of the human fleet emerging from stealth behind the broken horizon of the moon. The trap Admiral Rhodes had laid was unfolding. Elias' job was to hold the armies in hesitation long enough for the truth of their vulnerability to sink in. But if even one soldier broke, if even one decided to charge, the illusion would shatter. He'd be dead in seconds. Iraq roared again, spittle flying, fury burning in his eyes. You dare so dissent among my soldiers? He turned to the nearest line, his blade flashing upward. Kill him or I will kill you! The soldiers froze, caught between fear of their commander and the unsettling weight of the human's words. Elias knew he had to act quickly. He leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying with unnatural clarity. That's the choice, isn't it? Obey or think. Follow or be free. He tilted his head. How long do you plan to be someone else's weapon? The silence broke, not with battle, but with laughter. From somewhere deep in the ranks, a low, nervous laugh bubbled up. Others followed. It wasn't the laughter of humor. It was the laughter of realization, of walls cracking. Elias stood taller. His heart still pounded, but now there was a fire in his chest. He had seen it. The shift. The crack in their unity. He had them. The laugh carried, rippling through the armies like a spark rolling across dry grass. Soldiers weren't supposed to laugh in formation. They weren't supposed to break their iron composure, especially not under the eye of General Iraq. Yet there it was, uneasy chuckles, the sound of discipline eroding grain by grain. Elias Kale knew better than to smile too soon. The situation balanced on a knife's edge. He had planted doubt, but doubt alone wouldn't hold back tens of thousands of trained killers if Iraq snapped them out of it. The reptilian general's rage was palpable, his claws digging furrows into the fractured stone beneath his boots. He bared his serrated teeth, looking every inch the predator he was bred to be. You think this makes you clever, human? Iraq spat, his voice booming across the ranks. You are nothing. One fragile creature, soft flesh and brittle bone. Do you believe words will shield you from plasma fire? Elias tilted his head, calm as ever, though his pulse thundered like artillery. You should ask yourself why you're so afraid of my words, General. That landed harder than he expected. Soldiers near the front shifted again, exchanging looks. The discipline Iraq had relied on all his life was cracking, and he knew it. Fury flared in his burning yellow eyes. Enough! Iraq roared. He turned his blade toward the nearest line of soldiers, a phalanx of insectoid warriors bred for obedience. Advance. Now. Or your families will pay for your disobedience. The threat hung heavy. Elias saw the soldiers flinch, mandibles clicking nervously. He realized something in that moment. Iraq wasn't commanding loyalty. He was ruling by fear. And fear, once revealed, was fragile. Elias took a step forward, voice steady, deliberate. Listen to him. He doesn't see you as soldiers. He doesn't see you as comrades. He sees you as tools. Disposable. Replaceable. And if you hesitate, even for a second, he'll destroy not just you, but everything you care about. That's not leadership. That's chains. The insectoid warriors froze, their weapons trembling in clawed hands. One of them, a female with scarred carapace plates across her chest, lowered her rifle half an inch. It was the smallest motion, but Iraq saw it. With a snarl, he raised his plasma blade to strike her down. Elias didn't think. He couldn't. If Iraq killed her, the fragile spell would break, fear would reassert itself, and the armies would crash down on him. He shouted before his mind could catch up. Stop! The word cracked across the battlefield like thunder. Elias poured every ounce of will into it, the raw conviction in his chest radiating outward. It wasn't just sound, it was presence. For a breathless moment, it was as if the battlefield itself froze under that single command. And against all odds, Iraq did stop. His blade hovered inches above the insectoid's head, his muscles trembling with suppressed fury. He turned his gaze slowly toward Elias, hate burning hotter than plasma. You dare! He hissed. But the insectoid soldier, emboldened by the pause, straightened. She didn't raise her rifle again, but she didn't kneel either. Others saw her, and the ripple spread, hesitation becoming defiance. Elias felt the shift, and something inside him clicked. He wasn't just stalling anymore. He was leading. Somehow, impossibly, the words of one human were unraveling armies that had never faltered before. Iraq bared his fangs. Enough of this charade. He turned sharply, raising his communicator. Orbital batteries, target the human fleet. Erase them. Elias's stomach dropped. This was it, the complication he feared. His fleet, hidden behind the moon's fractured horizon, was vulnerable if the Empire fired first. And once blood was spilled, no words could hold back the tide. He needed more time. Wait, Elias said quickly, raising his hand. His tone was no longer calm, it was sharp, commanding. The soldier's eyes snapped back to him, even Iraq hesitated just a fraction. Think, General. If you fire on us now, in front of all these soldiers, what message do you send? That you had to call down the heavens to stop one man? The soldiers stirred again, whispers hissing through their ranks. Iraq's jaw tightened, fury burning brighter with every passing second. Elias pressed harder. Do you really want that story told? That the great armies of the Empire stood here, silent and unmoving, while one human spoke, and the mighty Iraq grew so desperate he called down orbital fire to silence a single voice? Elias let a faint smile touch his lips. History remembers moments like this, General. What do you think it will say about you? Iraq's grip on his blade tightened until his knuckles bled. The communicator in his other hand shook with rage. He wanted to order the strike. Elias could see it. But he also saw the doubt in the soldier's eyes. If Iraq gave the order now, if he destroyed the human fleet in cold blood while their army stood frozen, that doubt might turn into rebellion. Elias prayed Rhodes was watching. That the admiral knew when to step in. As if in answer, the sky shifted. The fractured horizon of the moon glowed faintly as stealth fields dropped. Human warships emerged into view, their black hulls catching the light of the nearby star. They didn't fire, didn't move aggressively. They just appeared, silent, patient, like predators who didn't need to chase their prey. The reaction among the soldiers was immediate. Murmurs, fear, the shuffle of boots against stone. For generations they had been told humanity was weak, backward, primitive. Yet here were ships that had slipped past every imperial censor, now hanging in orbit like shadows made solid. Elias raised his voice again, calm but edged with iron. Look at them. They didn't fire on you. They didn't come here to slaughter you. They came to prove a point. Humanity doesn't need armies to destroy you. We only need the truth. And the truth is simple. Your chains are not unbreakable. The insectoid soldier with the scarred carapace lifted her head higher. Her rifle was still lowered, but now her posture radiated defiance. Others followed. Weapons dipped. Ranks loosened. The silence stretched, thicker than before, heavier than any roar of battle. Iraq's fury reached a breaking point. With a guttural snarl, he lunged forward, plasma blade raised high, aiming to cut Elias in two. The human didn't move. He couldn't outrun that kind of speed, couldn't block that kind of weapon. All he could do was trust. And trust, miraculously, was answered. The insected soldier moved first, stepping between Elias and the blade. Her claws shot up, catching Iraq's arm mid-swing. Sparks flew as plasma seared against her carapace, but she held firm. Her mandibles clicked as she hissed words in her native tongue, defiance boiling over. Others surged forward, not to strike Elias, but to block Iraq. Soldiers of a dozen species, moving as if by instinct, raised weapons not at the human but at their commander. The air crackled with tension. Elias stood frozen, heart hammering. He had done it. Somehow, impossibly, he had turned the Empire's own soldiers against their general. But the danger wasn't over. Iraq snarled, his blade sparking against the insected's grip. "Traitors!" he bellowed. "You think a human will save you? He will lead you to ruin!" And for the first time, Elias answered not with philosophy, not with calm, but with fire. His voice rang out like a hammer striking steel. "No. Humanity won't save them. Humanity will remind them they can save themselves." The words ignited something. Soldiers who had stood frozen now stepped forward, weapons lowering, voices rising. Not all, many still clung to their fear, but enough to fracture the army's cohesion. Above, the human fleet held position, silent sentinels. Below, the Empire's greatest army stood divided, torn between obedience and awakening. And Elias Kale, one man without armor or weapon, realized the terrifying truth: he had started a war not between species, but within them. The first shot shattered the silence. It wasn't from the humans. It wasn't from Iraq. It came from the chaos boiling within the Empire's own ranks. A nervous soldier, scales quivering and weapon trembling, fired into the air, not at Elias, not at the humans, but at nothing. The plasma bolt streaked into the black sky and exploded in a blossom of light. That one mistake broke the fragile balance. Dozens of soldiers shouted at once. Some raised weapons at Elias, some at Iraq, some at each other. The discipline drilled into them for generations collapsed in an instant, splintering under the weight of fear and doubt. The battlefield became a storm of conflicting instincts: obedience, rebellion, confusion. General Iraq roared, his voice shaking the ground. "Traitors! All of you!" His plasma blade spun, arcs of burning light slashing at the insected soldier still blocking his path. She held fast, carapace cracking under the heat, refusing to yield. Elias knew he had seconds, maybe less. If Iraq killed her, the fragile coalition of dissent would die with her. The armies would rally under fear again. Humanity's chance would be gone. He did the only thing he could. "Stop!" Elias shouted, his voice carrying with unnatural force. But this time, he didn't just speak to Iraq. He spoke to every soldier on that field. "You don't have to fight for him. Not for chains. Not for fear. Fight for yourselves." The words ignited something. A roar rose, not of obedience, not of mindless battle cries, but of defiance. Soldiers surged, some against Iraq's loyalists, some against their own commanders, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire's greatest army fractured before a shot had even been fired at humanity. But Iraq wasn't finished. His strength was monstrous, his fury unrelenting. With a guttural snarl, he wrenched his arm free from the insected's grip and hurled her aside like broken machinery. His plasma blade swung toward Elias with terrifying speed. Elias's body reacted before his mind did. He stumbled backward, boots skidding across fractured stone. The blade hissed through the air where his chest had been a moment before, heat searing his face. He wasn't fast enough. He'd never be fast enough. Then another figure interceded. One of Iraq's own soldiers, a reptilian, scales dulled from years of service, lunged forward, slamming the butt of his rifle into the general's side. The strike barely slowed Iraq, but it shifted his momentum just enough. The plasma blade missed Elias by inches, carving a molten scar into the ground instead. Iraq roared, spinning, his blade cleaving the rebellious soldier in two. The air filled with the stench of burning flesh. The battlefield went still again, but only for a heartbeat. Then the storm broke. Chaos erupted. Soldiers turned on commanders. Commanders barked orders drowned out by defiant shouts. Weapons fired, not in disciplined volleys but in chaotic bursts. The fractured moon's surface lit with flashes of plasma and the screams of war. Elias dove for cover behind a shattered outcrop, heart pounding so violently it hurt. He had done what Rhodes asked, sowed hesitation, sparked rebellion. But now he was in the middle of a civil war with no weapon, no armor, and no guarantee the rebels would remember not to kill the unarmed human at the center of it all. A shadow fell across him. Elias spun, expecting death, but found the insected soldier crouched beside him instead. Her carapace was scorched, cracked, her mandibles twitching with pain, but her eyes burned with fierce clarity. "You spoke truth," she rasped in halting translation. "Now truth bleeds." Elias nodded, breathless. "What's your name?" "ZYRR," she hissed. "Then ZYRR, we need to survive this. Both of us." ZYRR's mandibles clicked in grim amusement. "Survival not certain. But fight is." She shoved a fallen rifle into his hands, the weapon far too large and heavy for human arms. Elias almost dropped it. "I don't know how to fire this thing," he admitted, fumbling with alien controls. ZYRR's mandibles twitched again, this time in what Elias thought might be laughter. "Then shout. That is your weapon." She leapt over the rock, claws flashing, throwing herself back into the melee. Elias stayed low, clutching the oversized rifle uselessly. She was right. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to speak. And maybe, just maybe, that was more powerful. He rose, climbing the jagged stone until he was above the battlefield. Plasma fire streaked past him, soldiers clashed below, Iraq's blade burned like a star in the chaos. Elias cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted with every ounce of strength in his lungs. "Listen to me!" The sound cut strangely through the battlefield, louder than it should have been, clearer than plasma fire and screams. For a heartbeat, soldiers glanced up, distracted by the absurd sight of one unarmed human standing tall in the chaos. "Look at yourselves!" Elias bellowed. "You're not fighting humans. You're fighting each other. Because you know the truth, your chains can break. You don't need the council. You don't need fear. You don't need him." He jabbed a finger toward Iraq, his voice cracking with fury. "You are free the moment you decide to be." It wasn't magic. It wasn't control. But it was enough. The battlefield split sharper. Soldiers who had hesitated before now threw themselves against their commanders with renewed conviction. Iraq's loyalists tightened formation around him, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered by those who had nothing left to lose. The general's fury grew monstrous. He fought like a beast unchained, every swing of his plasma blade carving through rebels, his roars shaking the fractured stones. He carved a path toward Elias, his eyes burning with singular purpose. "You think you've won, human?" Iraq snarled as he advanced, blood steaming off his blade. "You've doomed them all. Without the council, they are nothing." Elias's legs trembled. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. But he stood his ground anyway. "Without the council," he shouted back. "They are finally themselves." Iraq lunged, blade raised for the killing strike. ZYRR appeared again, slamming into him with a screech, claws raking against his scales. Other soldiers piled in, grabbing at his arms, his legs, dragging him down by sheer weight of numbers. Iraq roared, thrashing, cutting them down one by one, but every second he fought them was a second Elias lived. Above, the human fleet moved at last. The black warships slid into position, their weapons glowing, but still, they did not fire. Their silence was louder than thunder. They were not here to annihilate. They were here to prove. Elias raised his voice once more, raw, hoarse, but unyielding. "This is your moment. Choose. Not tomorrow, not next cycle, now. Choose who you are. Free or slaves forever." The words carried through the chaos, carried into hearts already trembling on the edge. And the tide turned. Rebellion surged. Soldiers of every species rallied not around banners, not around commanders, but around the idea Elias had planted. Iraq's loyalists broke, faltering under the weight of their own crumbling faith. The general himself fought like a demon, even as dozens swarmed him. Plasma fire scorched his scales, blades cut into his flesh, but still he stood, roaring defiance even as his army splintered around him. Elias stared down at the chaos below, chest heaving, voice gone ragged. He had never commanded. He had never fought. Yet somehow, impossibly, he had done what no weapon could. He had fractured an empire's army with words. But Iraq was still alive. And as long as he was, the war wasn't over. The general threw SCI-FI to the ground, blood soaking her carapace, and locked eyes with Elias. His snarl curled into something darker than rage, determination. "You will not speak again," he growled. And with terrifying speed he charged. Iraq thundered toward him, plasma blade raised like a sun of pure destruction. The ground quaked beneath his charge, each step vibrating through Elias's bones. The general's eyes burned with unrelenting fury, and Elias knew with the clarity of inevitability, this time, there would be no one fast enough, no ally close enough. If Iraq reached him, he would die. Elias's hands shook as he clutched the alien rifle SCI-FI had given him, but he didn't raise it. He couldn't. He didn't know how to fire it, and even if he did, one shot would never stop a monster like Iraq. His weapon wasn't plasma, wasn't steel. It had never been. It was his voice. As Iraq closed the distance, Elias shouted with every last breath in his lungs. "Do you see him? Look at him!" His words cut across the battlefield, louder than the roar of war, louder even than Iraq's own bellow. Soldiers, rebels, loyalists, even the undecided, snapped their heads toward the charging general. "This is the Council's champion," Elias cried, desperation sharpening his voice into steel. "This is what they think leadership is: rage, fear, slaughter." He spread his arms wide, standing tall on the fractured rock. "And I ask you, who do you follow? Him who rules by terror? Or yourselves, who just proved you could break his chains?" Iraq lunged, blade descending like the hand of a god. Elias didn't move. He closed his eyes. The blade never touched him. A wall of bodies slammed into Iraq from the side. Soldiers, alien soldiers, his own, threw themselves between him and Elias. Not one or two, but dozens, then scores. Insectoid, reptilian, avian, mammalian, species who had never stood together except under the Council's leash now moved as one. They dragged Iraq down in a tidal wave of defiance, grappling his arms, pinning his legs, forcing his blade away. He roared, struggled, cut them down in handfuls, but more came. For the first time in his life, the general fought not against enemies, but against the very army he thought he commanded. Elias opened his eyes, staring down in awe as the impossible unfolded. He hadn't stopped Iraq. They had. The soldiers themselves. And it was their choice, not his command. Iraq broke free for a heartbeat, blood pouring from rents in his scales, blade flickering. He staggered upright, chest heaving, glaring up at Elias. "You think this changes anything?" he roared, spittle flying. "The Council will never allow it. They will burn your world. They will erase your name. They will." "Enough," Elias said. His voice was quiet, but the battlefield went still as if the stars themselves leaned closer to listen. The soldiers froze Iraq in place, their grips iron, their weapons pressed to his throat. The general snarled, but the sound was hollow now, stripped of authority. Elias stepped down from his rocky perch, his boots crunching against fractured stone. He walked slowly, deliberately, closing the distance between himself and the monster who had sworn to end him. Each step echoed in the silence, each step heavier than the last. When he stood before Iraq, Elias looked not at a general, not at a conqueror, but at a man stripped bare of power. A creature who had ruled by fear and found, at last, that fear was not enough. "You spoke of history," Elias said softly, his eyes locked on Irax. Let history remember this. You didn't fall to humanity's armies. You didn't fall to our weapons. You fell because your own soldiers stopped listening. Irax spat blood, hatred burning. They will never follow you. Elias leaned closer, his voice a whisper that carried like a thunderclap. They don't have to. They only have to follow themselves. The soldiers tightened their grips. Irax's roar turned into a strangled cry, cut short as he was dragged down, pinned to the ground beneath the weight of those he had once commanded. His blade hissed and sputtered as it was torn from his hand, sparks dying in the dust. And just like that, the general of the Empire was silent. The battlefield held its breath. Thousands of soldiers stood frozen, staring not at the human fleet, not at their broken general, but at Elias Kale, the unarmed man who had walked into the maw of an empire and turned it inside out. Elias didn't raise his hands in victory. He didn't cheer. He simply stood, shoulders trembling, exhaustion threatening to collapse him. He spoke once more, voice ragged but steady. You've already won, he told them. Because for the first time, you chose for yourselves. The silence cracked. Not with laughter this time, not with confusion, but with something deeper. A murmur. A chant. It began with Ziwairar, her mandibles clicking as she hissed words in her native tongue. Others picked it up. Different languages, different sounds, but the meaning was clear. Defiance. Freedom. The chant grew, swelling until it was a roar that shook the fractured moon itself. A roar not of obedience, but of rebellion. Of life reclaimed. Above, the human fleet watched in silence, weapons still cold. Admiral Rhodes's voice crackled faintly in Elias's earpiece, taut with disbelief. Kale, what in God's name have you done? Elias almost laughed, though it came out more like a broken sigh. What you told me to, Admiral. I spoke once. The battlefield stretched before him, no longer an army but a storm of liberated voices. The Empire's greatest weapon, its control, was broken. And humanity hadn't fired a single shot. But Elias knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. The Council would rage. They would retaliate. They would send fleets, assassins, worse. Earth's defiance would echo across the stars, and with it would come fire. Yet something had changed forever. Because armies had fallen silent. And in that silence they had found themselves. Elias turned to Ziwairar, battered but alive, standing at his side. What happens now? He asked. Her mandibles clicked in something like a smile. Now, Galaxy burns. But not just humans. All who remember today. Fire spreads. Elias nodded slowly. He could already see it. Seeds planted in the ashes of chains, sparks catching across worlds. Not a war humanity fought alone, but one humanity had lit with nothing but a voice. He looked up at the black hulls of the human fleet, then back at the countless faces turned toward him. His voice, hoarse and worn, rose one last time. Then let them come. Humanity isn't afraid. And neither should you. The roar that answered him shook the heavens. And so it began, not the end of humanity, not their subjugation, but the start of something far greater. An empire cracked, a council trembling, and a galaxy that would never again be silent when one human spoke.